Folks, welcome to the Washington Township Zoning Board of Appeals meeting for September. If you can, please rise. We're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance first. Flag up front here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, our next order of business, Secretary Dan, roll call.
Mr. Sacco.
Here.
Mr. Pollock.
Here.
Mr. Stevenson.
Here.
Mr. Kozel.
Here.
Myself, Dan Dutkowski, here. All present.
Well,
We are also joined by our attorney, Christine Anderson, zoning and planning administrator, Dana Birschbach, and Joe Tangeli from Giffords Webster.
all right, thank you, Dan. Approval of agenda, can we get a motion?
I'll make that motion.
All right,
Support.
all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. On the minutes, can we get a motion for approval of the minutes of the last meeting?
I'll make that motion.
Support.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. I see there's no correspondence, which lets us move on to new business. If anyone has anything to say other than what's on the agenda this evening, feel free. That would be new business. Okay, seeing that there is none, we can move right on to our first matter, 58599 Glacier Club Drive. And we're talking about Article 3 zoning districts. Section 3.23. Note the district standards, B6 existing residential developments, a variance request for an at-grade paver patio that will extend 9 feet into the rear yard setback to parcel precisely number 240433127051. This is Glacier Club Phase 4. And whomever is here to speak on this application, please move forward to the podium and let us know what you have.
Good evening. Essentially, what I'm asking for is to build a patio under the direct outline of the deck that is above. It will follow the exact dimensions and not extend any further than the variance that was applied or approved in 2017.
You are Mr. Falk, right?
Correct.
John E. Falk at 58599 Glacier Club Drive.
Correct.
Okay. Washington Township.
Correct. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I don't know your procedures. But
No,
thank
no,
you.
no. I should have told you to, name and address, rank and serial number. So, no, that's okay. Continue.
That's basically it. I provided some photographs along with the application. Photograph number 1, I believe, shows the condition of the ground underneath the current deck, which, because of the location of my unit, which is bordering the woods, I'm on the west side of Glacier Club Drive, I get very little to no sunlight in the back, so it does cause a little bit of a problem underneath to where I can't use the sliding doors exiting the back of my basement.
Okay. I see your Glacier Club 4 Association has no argument with you doing that.
Not at all.
Okay. Yeah, the picture you provided is quite definitive as far as your door wall.
Yeah.
Understandable, your concerns. This map here with the yellow parcels, what is that trying to indicate?
I have no idea. I've not seen that one.
Is Jimi Hendrix here tonight? What's going on?
So that map that you're looking at, all that is, it's reflecting the variances that the township ZBA has granted over the years for that phase. So I just included it so you can see. A majority of them were for the elevated deck, just as he had received a variance for.
Okay.
Some of them came in with both the patio and the deck at the same time.
All right.
But since his variance at the time was only for that elevated deck, he didn't come in with the patio, so that's why he's back before you tonight.
Thank you, Director Dana. That's very dispositive. Wish you should have autographed this. I wouldn't have had to ask.
Dana, this was part of the original consent area. And that's how this thing got so sandwiched in many years ago, because I know we did approve quite a few variances in there.
Yeah, for
Because they
this
just don't have a
phase.
flat backyard.
Yeah, for phases 1 through 5, they did not allow for any decks or patios to go out of the building envelope. And then in phase 6 and 7, we corrected that by allowing for the setback that's consistent with our ordinance today.
Do you know which parcel is this on here?
51.
51.
51, it's 51? Okay, that was
Okay, very good. All right, board members, any other questions of Mr. Falk before we open the public hearing?
Well, looking at this right here, so I see we granted variances between 6.6 feet all the way up to 10 feet. So to me, this does not seem out of the norm as to what we have done in the past and is consistent with what we have done in the past.
Very good.
So beyond that, I really don't have any statement, Mr. Falk.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, I agree. I concur. I also think that the neighbors next door to you that don't have their patios, they'll be coming to see us next.
The neighbor on the north does not have a patio or a deck.
Yes.
The neighbor on the south has both.
I see that.
And in actuality, in photo number 2, you will see that, how do I say this? The support beam or the support post for my deck, that is the outer 2 legs of my deck.
Right.
And a direct line down that, you will see that both the deck and the patio for the unit south of mine will actually exceed the distance that I'm requesting.
Right. Thanks. These are some great photos.
Yeah.
That's from his deck. Really looks good. I took a drive over there. I checked it out. You got,
Very good.
Try using an iPhone. It doesn't,
you did
everybody.
a good job. Explained exactly what you're.
Well, Ben has contributed, so has Dan, and I would like to not deprive you of your public hearing, Mr. Falk. So, we work hard to do things properly, and we like to let people know that notice is hereby given that the Washington Township Zoning Board of Appeals is holding a public hearing on Monday, September 12th this evening at 6:30 PM at the Washington Township Boardroom. John E. Falk, 58599 Glacier Club Drive, Washington Township, Michigan, 48094. By reason of Township Zoning Ordinance, Article 3, Zoning Districts, Section 3.23, Note to District Standards, B.6, Existing Residential Developments, purpose of the request. To request a variance which, if granted, would allow the applicant to construct an at-grade paver patio that will extend 9 feet into the rear yard setback, which will, in its reality, if granted, be only underneath the deck. It exceeds what is permitted within Glacier 4 development, since the allowance for patio decks is only permitted within the building envelope. And our parcel in question is 2404-331-27051. All property owners within 300 feet have been notified there in Glacier Club Phase 4, and the public is here this evening. So for a few moments, we'll have
I'll make a motion to open public hearing.
thank you, Dan. Support. All in favor?
Aye.
Very good.
Thank you.
Hold on there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We're not finished. We're not finished. We have to give you the public hearing, and it's underway.
Okay.
If any resident would like to come up to the podium and they have any comments, concerns.
Okay, seeing that there's nothing from the public this evening concerning your matter, I get a motion to close the public hearing.
Close the public hearing.
Support.
Support, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, board members, what can we say about Mr. Falk here? Nice things?
I can say a lot of nice things. You get
Okay.
a lot of nice pictures, and I think in the spirit of what all the neighbors have had, I think that I'm going to make a motion to approve.
Oh, all right,
Support.
okay.
The request made for 58599 Glacier Club Drive for variance from the Washington Township zoning ordinance, Article 3.0 zoning district, Section 3.23, Standard B6, existing residential development, to allow the applicant to construct at-grade paver patio that will extend 9 feet out of the building envelope into the rear yard setback. Decision was based on the criteria outlined in the Washington zoning ordinance, 7.9E zoning board of appeals variance review procedures. Strict enforcement would cause practical difficulty or hardship. Conditions and circumstances are not unique because of, obviously, in the past, your neighbors on both sides. We've granted these in the past, and it's going to keep unity with everybody else. Conditions and circumstances were not created by the owner, self-created. Will not confer special land privileges, again, because it's going to stay consistent with all the other neighbors, and it's going to look nice. Will not be contrary to spirit intent of this ordinance.
Very good. I second that motion.
We already have a
I
second.
supported it.
Oh, all right. Hey, very good. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, let's take a roll on that, Secretary.
Mr. Pollak?
Yes.
Mr. Stevenson?
Yes.
Mr. Sacco?
Yes.
Myself, Dan Dudkowski, yes. Mr. Kozel?
Yes.
Motion passes. Your variance is granted.
Congratulations, Mr.
I can go home now?
That's it. That's it.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Get out of the mud, backyard.
All right. Very good. Next matter on the agenda, B, 60275 Shaner Road. Article 5.0 Site Standards, Section 5.8 Pathways, Sidewalks, and Walkways. A, applicability. 3, required roads. A, pathway or sidewalk shall be constructed in the following instances. 1, as a condition for the issuance of a building permit for all new residential dwellings, and B, general material requirements. Pathways. A, required roads. An 8-foot wide concrete pathway shall be required across the frontage of all properties abutted designated required roads. Variance to not have to construct an 8-foot concrete pathway across the frontage of 60275 Shaner Road. That is the request. Parcel number 240426-200-20 on the west side of Shaner Road, north of 26 Mile Road.
27.
27 Mile Road. I'm all right. And is our applicant here, Mr. Sean Georgeski? Did I say that right? Close enough, yeah. Oh, close enough. All right, please, approach the podium and give us your name and address, even though we already have it.
Yep, I'm Sean Drzeski. The address is 60275 Shaner Road.
Very good. Okay, tell us a little bit more about what you're looking for here, Sean.
I was just hoping to get a variance on the zoning for the sidewalk. I know that it's a more recent zoning change to have that installed there. I've been in the process of building since about September last year, and I got the building permit approved earlier in this year, about March or April. So I was just hoping to see if there's an option of not having to construct that sidewalk. I mentioned a couple reasons on there, and then I also included some pictures.
If you could state those reasons for us, go over them for the public, please.
Sure. A couple of the reasons were, so the area currently where the sidewalk is proposed to be is not cleared. There's lots of trees and dense vegetation, so that would all have to be cleared out. And then the second reason being is I already had the part of the driveway stone installed, and just for that, we had to dig down about 18 inches because the lot had never been developed. So there's just nothing to build on top of. So I think the same thing would have to happen for that sidewalk, and it's going to be pretty challenging to do so, I think. And then the other reason would be, I'm assuming in the future at some point the road is going to be developed and probably paved. So I guess the reason I bring that up is that if we do have a sidewalk done now, who's to say that it's going to end up being the same I guess, level or like distance away as it's supposed to be. So just for the future, I think it might be better to either wait for that or, but that's kind of the reasons I had.
Okay. Yeah, you stated a number of reasons also in writing, and you did very nicely. Mr. Dorjeski, did you attend any of our meetings over the course of the prior year dealing with sidewalks?
I have not, no.
We had a lot of them.
Okay.
A lot of folks attended,
Yeah.
and they were very interested in how we were going to update and rewrite our sidewalk ordinance. It's a very controversial issue. It was, and we worked hard. I say we, the board, trustees, planning commission, we had extra meetings where a lot of the folks were here that gave us input. And it was really a work of endurance,
Okay.
because there were different opinions. Some want sidewalks, some don't. We're at a point in Washington Township where we had to address that issue, and the new updated sidewalk ordinance does that. You're kind of asking us to do something that is in opposition to what we worked hard to reach. And it's true, you know, a sidewalk, you may not have others around you, but we've built a couple homes here in the township, and we may have been first in the development, and we had to have a sidewalk in front of our house, even though the lots on either side were empty. We wanted an occupancy permit, we just didn't want to build the house and look at it. So we're going to ask you some questions,
Okay.
and maybe inform or advise you of what we know about the sidewalk ordinance that you're asking us to, adjust.
Okay.
So, I'm glad you're here. Board members, any questions?
I think one of the things, some of the meetings, isn't there if you choose not to put in a sidewalk, isn't there a fund that you can put into some sort of sidewalk?
That was under the old, we were doing that as before, but now that the Board of Trustees, of which I'm a member on, that we voted and we approved the new zoning. By the way, you had mentioned earlier that you were building the house starting back in, I believe, 2021. The zoning never changed in that area to have a sidewalk in. It's always had it in the zoning to have a sidewalk there. That is considered a required road, and as a required road, we voted to have sidewalks there because those are main roads, those are roads that people are going to literally walk up and down on right there, and that's for safety reasons and make it a walkable community. So, like Mr. Sacco said, this was extremely vetted. There were multiple meetings within planning and zoning. There were multiple Board of Trustee meetings. There were a couple of master plan meetings. So this thing here was, this issue of sidewalks has been thoroughly vetted. And so I just want to say that right there, that this is a required road.
Okay, thank you,
For
Secretary.
optional roads, that would, the required road requirement is exactly, as Mr. Dukowski stated, the optional road gives you the ability to either, pay for that option, but he doesn't fall on that as the map indicates.
So there were good questions Member Kosel and Member Dedkowski brought up, Mr. Georgieski. It's, sometimes black letter law is really black and white, and there's nothing in between. If my board members see it another way, I don't see where you would fall in the cracks here. So we'll have your public hearing, as you're entitled to have, and then we'll do some discussion again afterward. So be ready for our questions.
Okay.
But again, notice of public hearing by Charter Township of Washington. Wait, before I start and go any farther, Secretary Dan?
Go right ahead, sir.
Can I get a motion for a public hearing?
And I'll support that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Notice given, properly given, that the Township Zoning Board of Appeals holds a public hearing on Monday, September 12th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. at the Van Dyke, Washington Township, Michigan Boardroom in the municipal building. Purpose of the meeting is to consider an appeal by Sean Georgieski, 11026 Doran Court, Shelby Township, Michigan, soon to be Washington Township, we hope, by reason of Washington Township zoning ordinance, Article 5, Site Standards, Section 5.8, Pathways, Sidewalks, and Walkways, A, applicability, 3, required roads, A pathway or sidewalk shall be constructed in the following instances. One, as a condition for issuance of a building permit for all new residential dwellings, and B, general material requirements. One, pathways, A, required roads, an 8-foot wide concrete pathway shall be required across the frontage of all properties abutting designated required roads, and that is in quote marks, those two words. Purpose of the requesting variance, if granted, would allow applicant to not have to construct an 8-foot concrete pathway across the frontage at 60275 Shana Road, which is designated in our ordinance as a required road for the installation of pathways. Property in question, parcel 240426-200-20. Again, the address 60275 Shana Road, location west side of Shana Road, north of 27 Mile Road. All property owners within 300 feet have been notified. The public is invited to participate, and you could see the information at our quick links at the Township website, and probably get a ZBA packet if you contacted Director Dana here. So that is our public hearing we're going to hold for I don't know how long. We might get some replies. Maybe, somebody might send something in. You just never know.
So I'll make a motion to open the public hearing.
Okay.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, somebody wants to speak? Can I say something?
Yes, come up to the podium.
Right up to the podium. Name and address?
Pero Demkowski, 60545 Shana Road. Not right next to him, but I'm the 5 acres on one side of him, and I have the other 5 acres right next to him. I have absolutely no intention of building a sidewalk. If and when that does happen, I'm okay with that. My point is, if he does do this, how long is it going to take before somebody else adds to those sidewalks?
That's a very good question, a very fair question. You are already there with your land. He's got a new construction permit he's trying to obtain.
So
Have you got new construction?
I've actually owned his property and given it to him.
Okay.
So he's on it with me. So I own the other 5 acres next to him with no intention to build. So if he does build, I guess, is that gonna just rot?
What will rot, the empty lot?
No, the actual sidewalk.
Not a concrete sidewalk, that'll last a long time, sir. And then
And are
plus,
you gonna be able to
we do not
guarantee-
know as to what timeframe you will sell that piece of property. As you sold your piece, that one piece of property to this gentleman here, you could easily do that to the other 2 pieces of property.
So I gave it to my daughter and my son-in-law. So
And once
selling
they
it-
start building-
Selling it wasn't a thing, it was.
It's
adding
not the
on to it.
selling, it's
Sure, and
development.
I'm not arguing, I understand what you're saying, is my thing is, that's fine, build it, but if no one's gonna ever use it, it leads to a creek and it leads to woods, I guess is my point. I mean, if the time came to where he had to build something, I understand. But with it going nowhere, I just bought the property on 60545, so it's a used house. I mean, again, I have no intentions of building a sidewalk.
But
I don't
you'll
think
never
my
know what the
neighbors
future
do.
is. You could be selling your property next year. So the next guy has to build, he's gotta put a sidewalk in. You don't know what your future's gonna be.
Sure, and they can also develop the property tomorrow. But I think at that given point, wouldn't it make sense to just develop it all? Have all one sidewalk instead of old, new, old, new?
I think this is because of the, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, the ordinance is now put in place for future
That is
homes are being
absolutely
built,
correct.
so it's gotta start somewhere, so.
Right, as this
It
is a
starts-
required
So
road.
when you sell your property, or if you're move or whatever, somebody else comes in there, developer, they have to continue the journey of,
To build new,
yeah, they gotta add on to that one. Obviously, there's a, you can't just put the sidewalk anywhere, like 50 feet from the road. Talk to the building department,
Sure.
everybody will know, so they'll be all together.
I guess owning property and understanding everything, I've dealt with a lot of, I can even show you pictures in the city of Warren where they've put sidewalks underneath sewers. And yet they made me disassemble it at my cost. So again, I think what I'm getting at, it's virgin property. He's gonna have to do a lot of work, and that's fine. I mean, if he has to, he has to. But who's gonna have to pay for that eventually if they come in and they say, all right, now we gotta do all the sidewalks, and his is all uneven, right? That's all I'm saying.
Somewhere down the road, if that's for a sidewalk to crumble like that, I mean.
It would be his responsibility as the property owner to
Yeah.
maintain it.
My whole
And we-
point.
We do have maintenance and requirements for maintenance and upkeep, has to be kept clear of snow, water, obstructions. I mean, we have an ordinance that covers everything, so he would be the responsible party.
Is this, ask you this, is this sidewalk has to be cement? Has to be.
Concrete,
Concrete.
because it's on a main
8
road.
feet.
So if it's 8 feet, it's cement, it's obviously not blacktop, so we don't have to worry about that.
But it leaves
You
no,
raised some good questions. I can tell you before the last year marathon of writing and updating our sidewalk ordinance, one of my favorite terms was sidewalk to nowhere too. Because I kind of tried to see the logic of, why does somebody have to do that if there isn't anything over here, anything over there? It was a lot of discussion. And this point of construction, new construction permit, was one that really took time to explain to our folks. They got it. Believe me, they did. They approved the language that we wrote for the sidewalk ordinance. Bless them. It wasn't easy. It was really a marathon. And I'm proud of the work that we all did. It's just the new ordinance. If we said, oh yeah, you don't need to do it, you know how many people we would have to tell you don't need to do it down the road? We'd be opening up not a Pandora's box, that would be the ocean. But that is something that we had to deal with in trying to refine the sidewalk ordinance.
I respect
And
that.
we had to start somewhere, gentlemen, and this is very important for us. There are a lot of folks who want sidewalks, and there's many that don't.
Oh, I want it. I mean, as long as it goes somewhere.
Right.
When it's going to a ditch in the woods.
Right, no,
they're
I
just building it for
understand.
no
And
reason.
when you get on nature beauty roads, and you get historically dirt roads, they don't want to hear about any of the sidewalk stuff or even paving those roads. And those issues came up. And the township, approaching 30,000 folks, is at a point now where we have to deal with these issues. Sidewalks, paved roads, unpaved, beauty. We're trying to keep it rural, we're trying to keep it open. People move out here for that. And we try to listen to our folks. Our township staff, our electeds, they believe in government of the people, for the people, by the people, shall never perish from Washington Township. And so we listen closely. And it took a long time, and a lot of meetings, and a lot of excited folks to get the sidewalk ordinance up to date. So I appreciate you.
Thank you.
You listening.
Thank you.
Anybody else on the public hearing? Motion to close the public hearing?
Motion to close?
Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Who supported that?
Benny.
Ben, thank you, Ben.
Okay, board members, any other questions of Mr. Georgeski?
I understand the concern of, and I'm going to use the word that it's been not previously developed, but that's what happens when you go into a new area, that sooner or later it's going to get developed, sooner or later you're going to disturb. Just as you cleared your site of the trees and the shrubbery to put your home in there, that's what we have to do for the sidewalks too. I mean, you're going to be able to keep whatever you want behind it, in front of it, that's going to be up to the county down the road. For right now, anything can stay there as long as that sidewalk goes in.
I guess if I could make one more point, is that Shaner on the west side between 27 and 28 miles, pretty much mostly developed already. There's I think 1 or 2 lots that don't have houses built on them. Most of the people seem to have been there for a long time. The east side of Shaner between 27 and 28, I believe, is a non-required road. And then Kittle, which is just to the west of me, is also a non-required or an optional. I don't remember what it says on there.
Which road is that you're saying?
Kittle,
Kittle, which is just to the west of me.
K-I-T-T-L.
And then, so I'm on the west side of Shaner, and the east side of Shaner, between 27 and 28, is, I think it's a non-required road. So I guess I just want to understand why just the west side and not the east side, or why not Kittle? Because the west side of Shaner is just as developed as Kittle. Everybody owns the lots, basically. They're all built. So like, there's going to be no real new construction, pretty much besides me and maybe one other lot. So it's just kind of adding to the fact that until you guys make the decision to actually like develop the road and all that, I don't think anything's going to happen. So, I mean, that could be 5, 10, probably 20 years down the road. You never know, right? But,
The task of this board is to look at dimensional variances,
right,
okay? Your responsibility is to convince us that there's a hardship in putting this sidewalk in.
okay.
I have yet to hear a hardship as to why you can't put a sidewalk in.
Probably about a
Other
$50,000
than you
sidewalk.
saying, they don't have it, they don't have it. That's not a hardship.
Okay,
We have to start somewhere as a township, as we grow, to make sure that we have a walkable community that is safe for the kids who are riding their bikes to school. Right now, they're riding on the side of the road to go to the schools and that. There's going to be people in that area there. We need to keep them safe. So,
Sean, I live in Washington Point. We were the first house on the court. And we had sidewalks. And there weren't sidewalks around us for probably 6, 7 years. It's just one of those things that, as far as new construction and what our roads are going to be required for us, from us, for others, our statute, our ordinance has to work with today and tomorrow, not the past.
I guess 8 feet is, what, double a normal sidewalk as well? Like the subdivisions, I understand, have sidewalks, right? 8
Yes.
feet seems like a lane on the road. It's pretty wide. So if it was just having to build it just in front of where my house is located, it'd be fine.
Right.
But the lot's it's almost 300 feet wide.
I can't tell you whether the road commission requires that 8 foot or the township does.
Okay,
The sidewalks.
That's the township.
Yes.
Yes.
The sidewalks in front of my house in Washington Point, I don't believe they're 8 feet wide, but I never measured it.
Because they're not on a main road.
Okay, thank you.
What's the speed limit on that, Shane? 55?
It's not posted, it's a dirt road, so there's not a regulated speed limit.
55, right, 'cause it's not posted?
Yeah, it's 55.
Yeah, that is a main road. Any other
Yeah,
questions, board members of Mr. Tedrowski? Butchered his name again. Okay. Probably could use a motion then. All right. I will make a motion to deny the request made for 60275 Shana Road, parcel 240426 200-20 for variance from the Township zoning ordinance, Article 5, Site Standards, Section 5.8, Pathways, Sidewalks, and Walkways. A, applicability. 3, required roads. Pathway or sidewalk shall be constructed in the following instances. 1, as a condition for the issuance of a building permit for all new residential dwellings and general material requirements. 1, pathways. A, required roads. An 8-foot wide concrete pathway shall be required across the frontage of all properties abutting designated, in quotes, required roads, out of quotes, and not allow the applicant to have and require the applicant to construct the 8-foot concrete pathway across the frontage. This decision was based on the criteria as outlined in the Washington Township zoning ordinance, Section 7.9E, Zoning Board of Appeals Variance Review Procedures. Criteria 1, strict enforcement would not cause practical difficulty or hardship. This is a requirement set forth in our statute, recently updated, regarding sidewalks in Washington Township. Criteria 2, conditions and circumstances are not unique to the property. This is a ordinance that requires newly constructed property to implement sidewalks as required. Criteria number 3, conditions and circumstances were created by the owner or self-created. He bought a lot without a sidewalk. He's building a home. Thankful for that, but he is subject to the ordinance like everyone else. Criteria number 4, it will confer special privileges on someone if we were not to allow this. It would virtually destroy what this township has set forth and worked hard for over the last year in updating our sidewalk ordinances. Criteria 5, it will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the ordinance. After all the work this township has put forth with the input from all our residents, we could not allow this to happen. Sorry, we have to deny your application.
I will support that motion.
Okay, all right, we'll take a roll call.
Mr. Sacco?
Yes,
Yes to deny. Myself, Dan Dudkowski, yes to deny. Mr. Pollak?
Yes to deny.
Mr. Kozel?
Yes to deny.
Mr. Stevenson?
Yes to deny.
I'm sorry, sir, but your variance is not granted.
okay.
So, quick question, I can't get my occupancy until that's done then, if I were to finish the house soon?
I'm sorry?
I would not be able to receive my occupancy to be able to move in if I were to get my house done without that sidewalk, is that true?
That is absolutely correct.
But he might be able to get a temporary. That's up to the building official.
Right, that'll be up to the building.
Yeah.
Building department.
Because it's based on the time, obviously, if you finish your home in December or January, we're not going to ask you to get a sidewalk out there. So that would be, Dave's sitting over there. But you speak with the building official, he's the one that,
He's right to your left there.
he can tell you what would be required for that.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Good luck. Okay. All right, we're moving on.
Thank you,
Next agenda matter. C, 5757 Cusick Lake Drive. Article 3.0 zoning district, section 3.3, R1 rural residential, D development standards, maximum impervious surface and interpretation of the Washington Township zoning ordinance, Article 2 definitions, section 2.2 definitions of impervious surface. The owner respectfully requests the following relief. For the Zoning Board of Appeals to grant a dimensional variance for the impervious surface requirement from its current 37% to 30%, which would allow the owner to keep the existing patio and driveway brick pavers on the property as is. Or 2, a ZBA interpretation of the term impervious surface under the zoning ordinance, Article 2 definitions to exclude the permeable pavers from being considered as impervious surfaces. Okay, parcel number 24-04-05-276-005. This is the Seven Lakes development. And do we have T. Callis, is Mr. Callis here? Or someone representing Mr. Callis?
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Tom Callis, appearing on behalf of the owner, Charles and Nancy Reinhold. This is regarding 5757 Cusick Lake Drive in Washington Township. It's in the Seven Lakes subdivision. I did submit a 4-page letter along with exhibits that are part of the record.
And we have that. I believe every one of us received that.
And what I have on the screen this evening, Mr. Chairman, is the subject property belonging to the Reinholds, which is in the middle of the screen. What you can see with the unfinished landscaping, sod has yet to be installed. On the right is a developed lot. I believe it's Mr. Brothers who's here in attendance with landscaping already installed. What we're here this evening seeking is a dimensional variance, as you indicated. The impervious surface currently equates to approximately 37.4%. Under the ordinance, the R1 ordinance, the maximum requirement is, or the maximum allowed, I should say, is 30%. Now, I think what's important is to get a understanding of the background of how we ended up in the situation that we're in. This is a development, which I'm sure you're aware, is under consent judgment. It goes back to September of 2000. A consent judgment at that time was entered with the court that allowed development of the Seven Lakes subdivision pursuant to a development plan that was attached to the consent judgment as an exhibit and made a part of the consent judgment. Part of that consent judgment required that they apply the R1 zoning ordinance requirements to those lots in that development. However, that was a flawed provision, and I'll tell you why. The R1 ordinance requires minimum just over 2-acre lots in size, and also requires minimum 150 feet of frontage. My client's lot is just over 1 acre in size, and it is a permissible lot under the consent judgment. Certain of the lots in Seven Lakes are 2 acres or more. Certain of the lots are 2 acres or less. The problem we have with applying this impervious surface requirement to a 1 acre lot instead of a 2+ acre lot is that it doesn't fit. My client's lot is just over 1 acre. That is more similar and more consistent with your R1A ordinance, which requires minimum 30,000 square foot lots, or 30,000 square foot lots with 90 feet of frontage, and R1B. So if you were to look at my client's lot as a 1 acre lot and put it under your R1A ordinance, all of a sudden we go from 30% impervious surface to 45% impervious surface. So that's really what this lot should be judged under. Although the consent judgment says R1, this is a 1 acre lot. It's not a 2 acre lot. R1 requires minimum 2+ acre lots. Now, the dimensional variance that we are seeking is consistent with what is developed in that area, prior approvals from the township of other lots in the township that exceed impervious surface. And in this situation, our impervious surface should really be 45% and not 30% under R1, because this is a 1 acre lot. What's interesting is when you go to your R1A lots, again, that are minimum 90-foot wide lots, your impervious surface is 45%. So you actually allow more impervious surface on smaller lots than you do on the 2 acre lots, which allow only 30% impervious surface. Now, the criteria for granting a dimensional variance is a practical difficulty, establishing a practical difficulty. Well, in light of the fact that this lot is only a 1 acre lot, but they're trying to jam it into a 2 acre R1 zoning district, the practical difficulty has been created. So we would request, we meet the criteria of the practical difficulty under the law, as was laid out in my letter. And the criteria that you look at, which you mentioned earlier, actually, in one of the prior situations, is that 3 situations or 3 criteria that the law looks at. This is established law. The first issue is whether compliance would be unnecessarily burdensome or unreasonably prevent the owner from using his property for its intended and permitted purpose, which in this case is single-family residential. The second criteria to look at is whether the grant of the variance would provide substantial justice to the owner, which it would, and whether relaxation of the ordinance would give substantial relief to the owner, which in this case it would also. And again, we're at 37.4% versus 30%, but really looking at us under an R1A criteria, we could be allowed up to 45% if this were in a different subdivision that wasn't controlled by a consent judgment. The third criteria is whether the board, members of the board, can grant a relief in such a fashion that the spirit of the ordinance is still followed and observed, and there is no threat or detriment to the public safety or security. We also fit that criteria here. This is a beautiful subdivision, as you're all aware. The house has been constructed, the pavers are in, the patios are in, the pool area is in. We are trying to secure a temporary certificate of occupancy to finish our final grading and to allow us to come in and finish up our landscaping, our sod, and our drainage system to activate the drains, the swales, so everything is up and operational. Now, I know one of the neighbors is here this evening, which I'm sure you'll hear from, who's complaining about our property causing flooding to his property. Well, the flooding is being caused, in our belief, because we haven't been allowed to finish grading our property and to finish our sod landscaping and activate our drainage, our swales, our French drains, et cetera. So we firmly believe, and we have no issue giving assurances or even conditions from the board, that upon finishing our landscaping, our sod, there will be no flooding to his property, and we'll make sure of that. It can even be a condition to a dimensional variance. So we feel that we meet all the criteria to grant a dimensional variance here. The practical difficulty was created not by us, but by the actual consent judgment that was 20 years ago, 22 years ago. And it was actually adopted under an open space ordinance and under an ordinance that no longer exists. You have a new open space ordinance. The one that's actually referenced in the consent judgment no longer exists in your zoning ordinance. So with that being said, we feel we have met the criteria to grant the dimensional variance. Practical difficulty has been met, and the statute has been satisfied.
Hey, Mr. Falk, thank you. You've expended a good amount of time making a nice presentation. Board members, any questions before we open for a public hearing?
I have a couple of them, if I may go first.
Go ahead.
Thank you. This was, you received HOA approval on or about June 24th of 2020, correct? For the plans on this development, on this home.
Whatever the
Okay.
record reflects.
And it said your project must remain in compliance with the submitted plans. Did those plans stay as approved by the HOA?
I believe the plans were satisfied. Now, keep in mind.
That's not the question I asked, sir. Were the plans as submitted to the HOA and approved by the HOA, is that what this home was built to?
The pavers, the landscaping was built to the plans.
I'm talking about the home. I'm not talking about the ground coverage. I'm talking about the home.
Whether the house was built?
Yeah, so
to
the whole
H-
thing right there, was
I
that
couldn't-
followed per the HOA, what was submitted to the HOA?
I don't know what the
and
HOA
approved By
approved.
the HOA.
It was.
That was. And it says, furthermore, that all township and state ordinances and building codes must be met.
That is
Was
correct.
that done?
Yes.
Well, if that was done, then you wouldn't be in front of us right now.
No, we're here for to address a practical difficulty.
That's a different issue, sir. You're asking for a variance because the township and state ordinances and building codes were not met.
They
So
were met.
therefore, you are seeking relief on a variance of 3,300 square feet.
Correct.
And there is, just an idea, the Glacier Club Floor Association for the deck that was approved initially submitted a variance acceptance letter saying that they had approved the deck already. Has the HOA submitted saying for the variance?
I don't know that an HOA has actually been established in this situation. But there's been no objection other than the neighbor, who I believe is here this evening.
Ben, you have anything?
Yeah, I got a question. We submitted these plans, we look at the pictures. I think a lot of times when people submit stuff to us, they'll show us, this is what we were doing, but we'd like to have a variance, sort of like the last person just showed us. And this is the difference, this is what we're gonna do differently. I don't see what was submitted on the 24th versus what was put in, so I can honestly see the difference. Why are we 3,300 square feet over? Where was that at? Was that on a pool? Was it the deck? Was it the sidewalk? Was it, what made it go over? That, I don't have that drawn out on my colored chart anywhere, do you guys?
I do not.
So that's what I'm saying, to have an attorney like yourself, bringing all this paperwork, have submitting everything was really nice, and I'm drawing, colored drawing, I would like to see what it was and what was changed. If it was submitted like that from the beginning, the building department would have said, hold on a second, you can't do that. So something was submitted, and then something was done. So what's submitted and what was done is two different things, and if it is, I want to know what it was, and then I can decide. If I can't see it, then I can't see it.
Yeah,
You know
and
what I'm saying?
I understand, but, and again, just the background here was this construction commenced pre-COVID, took place throughout COVID. It's been a 2.5, 3-year process. There were, different contractors involved, different vendors. My clients relied on those vendors. They're not landscapers, they're not builders, they hired someone to do the work, to build the house, to do the landscaping. Now, my understanding is, and I do have the landscaper here, is that initially, the plans that were submitted did not include the entire length of the driveway, for whatever reason. In fact, there were, because of the COVID situation and shortage of materials and labor, and somewhere along the lines, there was another landscaper was brought in, and the driveway was extended. And at that time, I wasn't involved, so, there was no objection, and, it ended up, we're here, that's why we're here, and that's why.
That's why I was saying.
Yeah, so that, and that's why we're here asking for the
I-
variance.
I could see sometimes landscapers, or something happens and you're over a little bit, maybe, then you come and say, we understand. Or maybe the township approved something and we found out later we shouldn't have, the building department. And then we, as a board, we'd say, well, it's on us. We'll let it go. But, and this is 7.5%. I think it is 7.5,
What's
7.4%.
25%, almost 25%
Yeah, and that's,
over the allowable.
3,300 square feet. I mean, their homes aren't even, a lot of people's homes aren't even that big. I mean, shouldn't somebody
but
would have
it's
said
all-
somewhere along the line, this is a little bit over?
It's over the allowable for a 2-acre lot,
Yeah, but
not a 1-acre
what was
lot.
submitted, we should have seen that. We wouldn't be here now. And then somebody would have said, got it, I see what you're trying to do.
But-
Maybe
right.
go in front of the board then.
No, I understand, but at the end of the day, it was built, okay? So there's some reliance on the township in building it, and there was no objection to it, and it is there today. So that's why we're here asking for this variance, because of the practical difficulty.
I just wish I could see what it was and what the difference is, that's all. If I could.
Board members, any other questions?
Yes, so to piggyback off of what Mr. Pollack was saying there, in addition, I have looked at the rear of this home, and I have read the verbiage in here where that this was designed to let water run off into the lake. And that's one thing that zoning ordinance just does not allow. It doesn't allow water runoff onto somebody else's property. You must keep it within your own footprint, and this is not doing that. So, I mean, this whole thing here is just,
The drainage
Not
is,
right.
the drainage is permitted into the lake. It's not on the neighbor's
it's
property.
not owned by, it is owned by the HOA. It is not owned by the individual.
The HOA does not own the lake, with all due respect.
Christine, if I can get clarification?
If I may, the drainage is being handled by your engineer? and by the building department, so you
Yeah,
don't have to worry
Don't
about.
even worry
how
about
it's
that?
done.
Yeah.
Nope.
Thank you.
Whether or not it's going into the lake or being maintained within the four corners is being handled by Giffords and Webster.
Thank you.
One thing Giffords and Webster does bring up is that they're not in favor, and they sum it up in their last sentence. They say, in simplest terms, this applicant would not be seeking this variance if they had only installed the impervious improvements shown on an approved plan. So it says approved plan, which did not exceed the 30%. Instead, they installed a different layout that created an overage of approximately 7% of impervious surface and required such a request, and that's from Giffords and Webster. So was there a separate plan?
The as-bills that were prepared by the engineer do show it as it exists today. We're over the 30%, as I indicated, by 7.4%. You know, and again, under a R1A zoning, it's 30%, but under what we're actually sized for, we'd be allowed 45% of impervious surface, which we're nowhere near. We're at 37%. So there's no detriment here to anyone, to the township, to its residents, in granting the variance. It's a dimensional variance. It's a practical difficulty criteria. It's not a hardship criteria. The practical difficulty elements have been met, and there's no reason why this variance should be denied.
So if I may, it sounds to me like the answer to that question is that what was submitted and approved is different from the as-built.
What was submitted and approved, I can't tell you what was submitted initially and approved. I can tell you that
Everything that I've read from the engineering, from our DPW, and from our building department is stating that.
I can tell you what the as-built show, and the as-built show this layout.
Yeah, the as-built do not match what was approved.
Board members, can I get a motion for a public hearing?
Make a motion to open public hearing?
Support.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, our public hearing for this matter. Notice is hereby given that the Washington Township Zoning Board of Appeals will conduct a public hearing on Monday, September 12th, 2022 at 6:30 PM, 57900 Van Dyke, Washington Township, Michigan, 48094, in the boardroom at the Township Municipal Building. Purpose of this meeting is to consider an appeal by Mr. Tom Callis Esquire, 31350 Telegraph Road, Suite 201, Bingham Farms, Michigan, 48025. Respectfully, on behalf of the property owner, I would submit, by reason of Washington Township Zoning Ordinance, Article 3.0 Zoning District, Section 3.3R1, Rural Residential Development Standards, Maximum Impervious Surface, in interpretation of the Washington Township Zoning Ordinance, Article 2.0 Definitions, Section 2.2 Definitions, Impervious Surface. Purpose of the request, the owner respectfully requests the following relief. One, for the ZBA to grant a dimensional variance for the impervious surface requirement from its current 37% to 30%, which allows the owner to keep the existing patio, driveway, brick pavers on the property as is. Or two, a ZBA interpretation of the term impervious surface under the zoning ordinance, Article 2 definitions, to exclude the permeable pavers from being considered as impervious surface. The property in question, parcel 24-04-05-276-005. Our address is 5757 Cusick Lake Drive. The location is a development in Washington Township known as Seven Lakes. All the property owners within 300 feet have been notified. The public may participate in the meeting, attending in person, sending a representative to attend for them, and full submittal package on this matter can be found at the Washington Township website listed under quick links on the left side of the main page under meetings and agendas, then Zoning Board of Appeals ZBA packets to search for this agenda. And this was published August 24th by our Secretary, Dan Detkowski. Okay, looks like our public hearing is open. Is there anyone here who would like to speak about this matter?
Just a procedural matter. We also have the impervious surface issue. Are we going to address that after this one? Or should we address that now and have the public hearing for both of them?
We'll It's a good question, whether we should do that with this here. I would allow you, because I did mention in the hearing about two, public hearing, if you want to bring that forth, Counselor, I think it fits.
Okay.
It's a good question.
Yeah, we might as well, because it's the second prong of our request this evening.
Yes.
In the event the board denies the variance request, the dimensional variance, then we had proposed a solution to replace brick pavers that are there now with a brick paver that's actually considered permeable by the United States EPA and by the manufacturer. And in my packet, I submitted those materials showing, the pavers installation. They're actually installed with an aggregate base on the bottom to allow for penetration of, exactly, you have it, yep. So the issue that came up with that solution was the definition of impervious surface. And that's found in Article 2 of your ordinance under the definition section. And impervious surface under your ordinance is defined, and it's as part of the record, it's in my materials, as a surface that has been compacted or covered with a layer of a material so that it is highly resistant to infiltration by water. So that's the key, highly resistant to infiltration by water. What we have proposed is a paver that's actually permeable. It's considered permeable by the U.S. government. It's considered permeable by the manufacturer. It's a solution to replace enough brick paver to meet the 30% impervious surface requirement, even though, again, we feel that, the dimensional variance is warranted. Also attached to the packet as Exhibit D to my submittal is an actual letter from the manufacturer, an engineer, who stated that these pavers are permeable and they create a highly functional permeable pavement. And he quoted as follows, and it's part of the record, but I'll read this into the record. As stated in the U.S. EPA document, permeable pavements and paver systems are considered green infrastructure as defined under the Clean Water Act and provide stormwater volume reductions, detention, and pollution removal, depending on the design of the system. Further, permeable pavements have demonstrated stormwater reduction effectiveness from 25 to 100%, subject to design and site conditions. If the native subgrade soils in 7 lakes are relatively sandy as stated, then the stormwater reduction effectiveness would be closer to 100%. So we're actually providing a solution, a paver that's 100% permeable. It will replace 3,200 square feet of the driveway, or perhaps less of the driveway and some of the walkways, but it is permeable, and it's a solution that should be, under our interpretation of the ordinance, would be acceptable.
Okay, very good. Board members, any questions about these pavers?
I just have one comment. This board has been tasked again, and I said this earlier, with determining dimensional variances and whether or not we are going to allow them or not allow them. I don't believe that this is this board's task to interpret as to what material is suitable for impervious surface. I believe that should fall with the building department.
Very good, Dan. Okay,
If I may respond, we're not asking you to interpret or determine what's impervious or what material is impervious. What we're asking you to determine is a zoning ordinance interpretation. We look at the definition that says highly resistant, impervious surface is something that's highly resistant to infiltration by water, okay? Our interpretation is that these pavers are not resistant to infiltration by water, and that is supported by a manufacturer's engineer's letter and by the U.S. EPA. Your township's position is that these pavers are in fact impermeable, even though all the materials confirm that they are permeable. So what we're here tonight asking with respect to interpretation, which it's your duty under law as a ZBA to interpret zoning ordinance provisions, is that what we're proposing is a permeable paver, permeable solution under the ordinance, and should be accepted as such.
My duty as a ZBA member is to interpret the ordinance as to a zoning variance, which is a dimensional variance, not as to determine the materials used,
If I may,
if you may.
this request is coming within the confines of the dimensional variance. And you have in your packet the opinion from the township engineer.
Yes, I do.
Exactly. And it's his opinion, and it's yours to choose to accept it or not. That the permeable pavers that are being presented and suggested by the applicant are still a hard surface. Okay? But this request that the applicant is presenting to you with respect to interpreting this provision as it relates to this variance is appropriate before this board.
That is appropriate.
It is appropriate before.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you, Christine. All right, we're in a public hearing. We have two issues, impervious surface dimension and possible impervious pavers that would be acceptable. Public have anything to say? Is the public here? It looks like the public is here.
I do have some materials, pass them around to right on one end.
Well, we need your name and address at the podium first, and we'll address your question after that.
Certainly. Sorry about that. My name is Vincenzo Manzella. I'm an attorney. My office is 3999 Garfield, Clinton Township, Michigan. I'm here representing John Brothers, who's seated in the front row. He owns the property at 5715 Cusick Lane. When the picture was up, his was the lot directly to the right of the
Okay,
5757 Cusick.
okay, Mr. Manzella,
Thank you. So,
go ahead.
thank you. So the materials that I'd like to share are photographs of the site. There's also a report that Mr. Brothers had done by Lori Schink. She's a civil engineer who's also in attendance here. And there's also a misdemeanor ordinance violation ticket that is being prosecuted by the Township of Washington. I think that's relevant to know that the applicant was served with a ticket on July 14th, some 2 months ago, for occupying the residence without a certificate of occupancy. It's our contention that he's still occupying it in violation of township ordinance. There's a court date in front of Judge Jennifer Andary on September 22nd. That's my understanding. But I do have a copy of that violation that was issued by the building department for a misdemeanor. So I can share that with the board. I'm not just saying
Board
it.
members, any problem reading
No
that?
objection. Thank you, sir.
Bring it forth, Counselor.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Please.
the existence of a misdemeanor citation is not relevant to the zoning ordinance variance request. That is an enforcement issue that is separate and distinct from anything to be considered by this board or any action taken by this board tonight.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Counselor. I was waiting for you to say that.
So this is the ticket, so we will ignore that. Thank you.
So the objection from Mr. Brothers is that the property at 5757 Cusick Lane is not maintaining its own drainage. The variance should be denied because he's not complying with township ordinances currently, is in continuous violation of the township ordinances. We've had meetings, and I've not attended the meetings, but there's been meetings, there's been discussions to try and,
Counselor, describe meetings. Who is meeting with who?
the parties have met. They've met with the Ms. Schink and Mr. Van Havermat. There was also meetings with building officials, as well as, my understanding is, the supervisor to try and reach a resolution. I've personally had discussions with Ms. Anderson, trying to facilitate, get these parties to agree, but as you can see from the photographs, there's a lot of runoff. I've got two civil engineers here who will tell you that installing sod or other vegetation will not solve this issue of the water running off and not being contained at the 5757 Cusick Lake address. It is going on to the neighboring property, allowing a variance for for more impervious surface. That water has to go somewhere. The water right now is going on to the neighboring property. There's been a solution proposed, it's contained in that report, and there's been resistance. So the neighbor, Mr. Brothers, is strenuously objecting to any variance that would allow for the impervious surface to be greater than what's allowed, because that just means there's less ground for the water to soak into, and the water is the problem that the neighbor is experiencing.
You're representing Mr. Brothers,
Correct.
and there are two engineers here, you say?
Correct.
Are
Ms.
you ready
Shank?
to bring them up to the podium?
Absolutely. Come on up.
Hi, I'm Lori Shink from Shink Engineering,
What's your address?
4146 Pine Grove Road, Fort Gratiot, Michigan.
Thank you, Ms. Shane.
I'm Jim Van Haverman. I'm a civil engineer, licensed engineer and licensed land surveyor. My address is 11341 Meadowbrook Drive, Warren.
Very good. Engineers, you're here on behalf of Mr. Manzella's client, I'm sure. What is your position in this situation?
So basically, the plot plan as designed for,
Can you speak up just a little bit, please? I'm sorry.
the plot plan for 5757 Cusick Lake does not show, basically it allows for the stormwater to go from his property to Mr. Brothers' property. So there are some revisions that need to happen to the grading on 5757 Cusick Lake in order to stop the runoff from going from his property to Mr. Brothers' property.
All right, very good.
The water needs to be diverted. Each homeowner is supposed to maintain their drainage on their own parcel, and that's not happening.
All right, does your partner there, partner engineer, have a comment?
Yes, with regard to this, there's an area particularly up in the front of the property that the original design did not call for any means of drainage. There was a small yard basin, the type you would typically buy at Home Depot. It's not designed to carry that type of a volume of water that would be generated during a typical storm. A design storm, and I don't want to get into numbers, is a 10-year, 20-minute storm event, which is what storm systems are typically designed to. We ran some rough calculations, and the pipe coming out of there is a 4-inch pipe. That's got about half the capacity it would need, and that's even based on everything having grass down. So there's some revisions need to be made and some corrections, as Ms. Schenk indicated, some grading. It can be resolved, but it's going to take some grading and a little bit of work to change it.
Joseph Tangari, can you give us a little light in this commentary, if you will?
Well, not being the engineer, I can't say too much about the,
You don't look like Mike.
no, I'm certainly not Mike Kozak. But I can tell you that Mike's position is that, of course, he wasn't asked about the drainage that's on the site currently, but his position is that the surface that's there right now is over and above what was originally approved, and that an interpretation that allowed the replacement of that hard surface with a different hard surface that's rated as permeable would not be in compliance with the ordinance. That's what I can say for Mike without him being here.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from our public? Rebuttal,
Well,
Counselor?
I think they're still at the podium, sir.
Okay, are you finished, Counselor?
One other comment would be that, and I don't know if this is unusual for this board, but perhaps tabling this so that compliance can be obtained would be one option. But otherwise, consent judgment is a public record. They knew what they were signing up for when they entered into the purchase for this lot. And whatever the requirements are should be met.
Counselor, that's a generous suggestion you made about tabling, but that takes time, that takes money. We're all here now our board members probably can make a decision. I'm confident they will make a call. All right. Are you done, Mr. Manzella?
I am done.
You're finished, and how about our engineers? Are they done, your partners there? You can always come back and add anything.
Okay. I guess my only comment is, the plot plan as approved, in my opinion, should not have been approved, because it allows for the drainage from 5757 to go over the property line onto 5715 Cusick Lake Road.
All right. Thank you for your input. Rebuttal from Mr. Fall.
Yes, in rebuttal, Tom Callis again appearing on behalf of the owners, Charles and Nancy Reinhold. With respect to the issues they raise, it's really irrelevant to what we're here for this evening. The flooding, any flooding that's created is created during the heavy rainstorms that we've had, and it's 100% because of we haven't been able to final grade our property, put our sod, landscaping, and our drains, activate our drains. That will 100% take care of their problem. If it doesn't take care of their problem, and this is really irrelevant as far as why we're here this evening, but we have offered, and I'll state on the record, we'll take care of any issue regarding flooding. We had no objection to his engineer's report. We said we would meet whatever requirements they had. But first, let us finish our lot. Let us grade it. Let us sod it. You know, there may not be any issue at all once all that is done. And especially the water is all draining down. You can see the slope. This is Mr. Brothers' property, and I wasn't going to bring it up, but I would be very surprised if that's between his house, his driveway, his pavers. I would be very surprised if he's at 30% or less of impervious surface. Okay, so I have FOIA requests.
Our zoning administrator says yes.
I have FOIA requests to the township. Okay, and I'm going to find out where temporary C of Os were issued, because we were denied a temporary C of O also. Even though under your ordinance, under section 7.01 of your ordinance, temporary certificates of occupancy are allowed, okay? They're allowed for 30 days, or if it's a landscaping screening issue, they're allowed for 6 months. That was also denied to us on the premise that the township doesn't grant temporary C of Os, okay? Unless it's weather related. So I have freedom of information requests out to the township, and I'm going to find out whether temporary C of Os have been granted to other individuals in the township. I'm also going to find out, because I have freedom of information requests, how many properties have been approved for certificates of occupancy that exceed the impervious service requirements of the ordinance of that applicable property. I would venture to say, and I'm not a betting man, but I would venture to say that there's a lot of properties in this township that exceed impervious surface, okay? This house was built, the landscape was done, the pavers were built, the driveway was built. There was no objection, okay? There's a thing in law called reliance, all right? My client is an innocent party here. He's not a contractor. He's not a landscaper. He hired vendors to do the job. He paid significant sums of money, which is neither here nor there, to have this beautiful house built, okay, in Seven Lakes to match other homes in that same subdivision. And every way we turn to try and get this resolved, we're met with resistance. And we're met with resistance when we shouldn't be. Temporary C of O, townships issue them all the time. There's no reason it shouldn't have been issued here, okay? Dimensional variance, we meet the criteria under the law. There's no reason it shouldn't be granted. This is a 1 acre lot that's being judged under a 2 acre criteria, all right? So we're at 37, not 45, which we would be allowed under any other zoning district for 1 acre lots, all right? So there's a lot of underhanded going on here, underhanded playing, and we're going to get to the bottom of it, all right? So it's not a threat. It's just something that's going to happen. But all that put aside, okay? Let's put all that aside. We've tried everything we can to work out a resolution, not only with Mr. Brothers, with the flooding is not an issue here. This is an impervious surface and a dimensional variance hearing, not a flooding issue hearing. But be that as it may, we'll work with him. I'm telling you on the record, we'll do what it takes to prevent any of our water draining onto his property. And the engineer's statement that this was not improperly designed, well, that's too late. These were designs that have been approved by Township engineering, okay? So, we're not the only ones here. It's time to look in the mirror. There's unclean hands. We got to this point for a reason, okay? And we're just trying to get it resolved, that's all. We're not trying to open up Pandora's box. We're not looking to do that. But every step of the way, we've been met with resistance. It's uncalled for, and it's not necessary. This thing can be easily resolved.
All right, Mr. Callis, very good. Are there any questions further from our board members?
Well, I
Mr.
think we would have to
Callis?
close the public hearing
Okay,
first.
very good, and looks like.
Motion to close the public hearing?
Second that.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, looks like our public has had their say.
Mr. Chairman, before the board goes any further,
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to point out that, first and foremost, the misdemeanor citation should not be taken into account by this board. In addition, the fact that a temporary CFO was requested, whether it was or was not, whether it was or was not approved, should not be taken into account by this board. It has absolutely nothing to do with the variance. More than that, the impervious surface coverage of Mr. Brothers' lot has absolutely nothing to do with the variance as requested. That should not be considered by this board. And the other properties within the township should also not be considered. The fact that the as-built do not match the approved plot plans should not be considered. Your concern is whether or not the variances as requested should be granted. Everything else needs to be left aside. There's, a lot of back and forth on both sides here. All that needs to stay out in the public. You guys need to look to the variances as requested and the standards in your ordinance. And any motion should have facts to back it up as to whether or not you're approving or denying it.
Very good, Counselor.
Christine, I fully appreciate what you just said, but I take exception to what the attorney has stated, that there are unclean hands here and that this is underhanded. I know this board here is of the highest integrity. I know our Board of Trustees is of the highest integrity. I know our planning and zoning, the Planning Commission is of the highest integrity. I know our directors are of the highest integrity. To call them underhanded and have unclean hands, I find that as an insult, not to be tolerated.
All right, thank you, Secretary. Board members, any questions or comments?
Yeah, so I'm a member of Seven Lakes, and I don't think we've met, but one of the things when I'm looking at the impervious surface, these pavers, which I think are a great thing, I think that's a great option to bring up, but it states that they're anywhere from 25% to 100% to reduce the stormwater. If that's sand, if it's anything like my land, there's a lot of clay. And I'm not an engineer, but I would venture to say that it'd be somewhere in the middle of helping that runoff. And how many, I guess I'm trying to figure out how much surface is going to be, are you offering to replace by those brick pavers?
Approximately 3,200 square feet.
Approximately 30, so you'd be trying to reach that, just over that 30%, you'd be trying to get to that. So even if you replace the 3,200 square feet, and assuming, so you'd be assuming they're 100% drainage. If they fell anywhere less than that, then we'd still be over the impervious surface.
At the 3,200 square feet would put us at the 30%
Correct.
of impervious surface, per our engineers' calculations.
If they're 100%.
Well, again, is it a permeable surface is the question. Is it highly resistant to infiltration of water or not? If it's highly resistant, we all understand impervious to mean water's not penetrating at all. These are permeable pavers. They're used all the time to create permeable solutions and permeable surfaces.
Mr. Callis, from information in front of me, it appears that our Giffords and Webster engineer, Michael Kozak's been with us for a lot of years. in simplest terms, the applicant would not be seeking this variance if they had only installed the impervious improvement shown on the approved plan, which did not exceed 30%. Instead, they installed a different layout that created an overage of approximately 7% of impervious surface. It appears you're here begging forgiveness and, instead of getting permission early on.
Not really. I mean, it's, for whatever reason, whether it was COVID, a switching of contractors, different people coming on the job site, we ended up where we're at. When it was brought to our attention late in the game, we took the initial steps to get it resolved. So that's the whole basis for ZBAs and granting variances.
We're familiar with granting variances, trust me. We just didn't step into this table here from yesterday. Also, it states from resource at our township, improvements instructed on site in excess of 30% impervious surface limitation were not approved by the Township Building Department, were not depicted on an approved plot plan, nor were they constructed pursuant to a permit issued by the Washington Township Building Department. Based upon discussions with the township planners, it's something that the impervious surface limitation may have both environmental and aesthetic impact components. There are some concerns here. There are some issues beyond what we can respond to this evening.
Can I respectfully respond?
Please.
If that's the concern, then why do you allow 45% impervious surface on smaller lots? You allow 30% on 2-acre lots, but you allow 45% on 1-acre lots.
This current board did not approve anything.
I understand. I'm not saying you did anything right or wrong.
Right.
My question, and that's why I'm puzzled, if that's really a concern, a legitimate concern, then why am I allowed to put 45% of impervious surface on a 1-acre lot, but only 30% on a 2-acre lot? And there's no logic to that.
Isn't every area R1, or R1A, or R1B?
Right.
That's R1A. I mean, that's R1. So that's why.
Different classification,
Yeah.
indeed.
It's,
We don't set those classifications, Counselor. We just have to.
Oh, I understand. I've been in front of ZBAs for 30 years.
And that classification came with the consent judgment, of which when this property was purchased, when this property was developed, was understood.
And our position is that it's really, and we understand it's a consent judgment, it's public record. We've done them, I've done tons of them.
You're asking me to change what the courts have already.
No, I'm asking,
That is part
that's
of
why
the
I'm asking for a dimensional variance. I'm not asking you to change the,
it's not going to be a dimensional variance if we don't approve the new pavers that you just got done talking about.
that's the second,
Yeah, so it's not, it can't happen. I mean, if.
that's the second prong of the
Yeah,
variance.
so,
Or that's actually the interpretation issue.
right, so,
Okay, board members, anybody ready to make a motion? Really, we have two motions to be heard.
Yes, yeah.
Correct. There'll be two separate motions.
Yes, thank you, Counselor. Two separate motions. Ben, you thinking?
no.
You're not thinking? How about Dan or Troy? Looks like Troy is working something up.
I think we all have something that we're working up, we're just finalizing how we want to present it.
Bear with us, folks.
Sure. And just so the record reflects, my clients are all here also. I forgot to mention that early on.
Very good, thank you.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, and a motion on the first issue, Troy?
Yes. I'll make a motion to deny the request made by 5757 Cusick Lake Drive parcel number 24-04-05, 276-005 for a variance from the Washington Township zoning ordinance, Article 3.0 zoning district sections 3.3 R1 rural residential. D, development standards, maximum impervious surface, and not allow the applicant to keep the existing patio and driveway pavers, making the impervious surface area for the property 37%. The maximum permitted impervious surface area in the R1 rural residential zoning district is 30%. This decision was based on the criteria as outlined in the Washington Township zoning ordinance section 7.9 E zoning board of appeals variance review procedure. Criteria, and all 5 of these criteria must be met in order to make it. Strict enforcement, although it would give a practical difficulty or hardship for the homeowners they've already built without asking for the variance. Conditions and circumstances are not unique to the property. There was a consent judgment outlining the property as an A1 property limiting to 30% impermeable. Conditions and circumstances were created by the owner or self-created. As Giffords and Webster's indicated, the original plans did not indicate that impervious surface was going to exceed 30%. Criteria 4, this will confer special privileges on landowner and cause a hardship to his neighbors. By allowing the variance, you stated earlier that there would be no detriment to anyone else. And there's an engineer and a builder who says otherwise at this time. Therefore, criteria 5, this will be in contrary to the spirit and intent of the ordinance.
Support.
Okay, any additions to that motion?
I do not.
I do have one commentary. From the information provided by our staff, it appears that applicant was provided information to comply with 30% impervious surface, and it was ignored a number of times, I add. That's what I will add to the motion.
Is such an addition acceptable to the motion maker?
Acceptable.
Is it acceptable to the second?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Dan, roll call.
Mr. Colzo?
Yes.
Yes to deny. Mr. Stevenson?
Yes.
To deny. Mr. Sacco?
Yes to deny.
Myself, Dan Dutkowski, yes to deny. Mr. Pollack?
Yes to deny.
Motion fails. Motion passes. The variance does not.
Okay, we have a second motion to address. Interpretation of the term impervious surface, which would exclude the permeable pavers from being included in the maximum impervious surface calculation. This request, if approved, will not require any removal of what has already been installed. Do I have a motion for this one?
That doesn't sound right.
No.
Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, it should be that it would be replaced with
With-
what he was presenting as,
Right.
Right.
sorry, that was my error.
Thank you, Deputy Dana. Okay, do we have any kind of motion here on this second issue? Term impervious surface.
I will make a motion to deny the request made for 5757 Cusick Lake Drive, parcel number 24-04-05-276-005 for interpretation from the Washington Township zoning ordinance, Article 2.0, definitions, Sections 2.2, definitions, impervious surface, which would not allow the permeable pavers from being included as part of the maximum impervious surface areas that is permitted in the R1 rural district, rural residential district. This decision was based on the criteria as outlined in the Washington Township zoning ordinance, section 7.9E, zoning boards of appeal variance review procedures. Criteria number 1, strict enforcement wouldn't cause hardship or difficulty. This should have never been, this permeable surface, as they're calling it, is not allowed within our ordinance. And I'm having a hard time putting these 5 criteria within this right here. But basically, this right here, our ordinance says is that we exclude permeable pavers. We do not allow it. So strict enforcement, I'm going to go back that we just don't allow it right there. Strict enforcement, while it may be an inconvenience for the homeowner to have to pull them out, our ordinance just does not allow it. Is it unique to the property? It was never put on any kind of a plot plan. It was never approved by the township. It was never approved by planning and zoning, the building department. Conditions and circumstances were created by the owner. They're the ones who put in all of the ground covering, the surface area without township approval, without the blessing of the building department. So it would confer special privileges to just allow them to go ahead and use whatever they wish. And I believe it would be contrary to the spirit and intent of the ordinance, as our ordinance just doesn't allow it.
I second that motion. Any additions to the motion, members?
Can a section be cited, please? An ordinance section?
Beg your pardon?
Can you cite an ordinance section that doesn't allow permeable pavers?
The beginning, the preamble, we have a motion on the table. We'll address your question after we take our vote. We do have the ordinance cited right at the beginning of these 5 comments that the secretary just stated. And they're pretty clear and they're pretty easy. You're asking this board to add a word into the ordinance. Ordinances aren't made overnight, and they aren't made at this board tonight. That word is not included in our current ordinance, and you're asking us to turn the ordinance upside down by including a word that does not belong there now, and maybe one day it will, but it doesn't now. So can we take a vote?
Myself, Dan Ditkowski, yes to deny. Mr. Sacco?
Yes, to deny.
Mr. Pollack?
Yes to deny.
Mr. Kolzel?
Yes to deny.
Mr. Stevenson?
Yes to deny.
All right. This motion and request for including a term in our ordinance that does not exist is denied. Both motions were denied, Counselor. Sorry.
Thank you.
for that.
Appreciate your time.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, board. Old business. Any?
No.
No old business. Okay. Public comments. Did we have any public comments there, Director Dana? Nothing. Okay. ZBA member comments. Any? No comments. It wasn't as long as an evening as I thought it would be.
And before we adjourn, I think we should address the workshop, sir, and then I have one to address if you don't
Okay,
mind.
very good, Secretary, thank you. Announcement for all of you out there, please come to our master plan workshop. Be held Monday, next Monday, September 19th, right here, 6 PM. And Joey, what are we going to talk about?
We'll be discussing the Village District and the rest of the commercial areas in the Van Dyke corridor.
Okay, very good. Village District always is fun and games.
And if I may, board members, we have also a master plan for the Parks and Rec Commission on October 6th, 7 PM. So please attend that.
What
Very
day-
important
what
to
day-
get.
what day of the
That
week
is
is that?
October 6th at 7 PM, so that's a Thursday evening for Parks and Rec, so that we can put the master plan for Parks and Rec together at the same time. So-
Where's that located at?
That will, I'm sorry, that will be located here in this boardroom. We reserved that area, and WBRW will be here to record it.
Is there a draft that'll be available online somewhere?
We will put one together once we have our next RWB meeting, which is coming up next week. We'll finalize the draft in that because we're going to look at hiring the, who will be putting our master plan together. So we have a couple of people that are supposed to come in front of our board there on the Parks and Rec. And so once we have all that information, Dana, I'll gladly submit it to you.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, very good. Thanks for that notifications, Secretary. Those are two important events, for sure, coming up. So, well, we've had a lot of meetings in this room over the last year. They continue to grow.
And I'd like to make one more comment. And I believe our township holds its ethics to the highest standards. And I very much took offense tonight to the words underhanded. And, you know, I know a lot of people here that work very hard, and nobody here has their hand out. And I'll be the first one to call the FBI if I find out somebody does. You guys are all tops in my book, and I want to thank every board member on every board that we have, every committee member on every committee that we have. You ladies and gentlemen, you put your hearts and soul into it, and I, for one, as a zoning board member, as a board of trustees member, as the Parks and Rec Commissioner, I sincerely thank you. And on that, I would make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, very good. I think I'll second that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay.